Ooh, it's on. Hi, everyone. It's so great to see so many of you here tonight with us, and to all the folks who are online as well. We can't see them, but we know they're there. I want to say welcome and thank you for joining us this evening as we celebrate Black History Month here at the University of Saskatchewan. My name is Melissa Just, and I'm the Dean of the University Library. We're hosting tonight's event on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis, and I'm grateful to live and work and learn and play on these lands, and I acknowledge my responsibility to honor and respect the land and its people's history and culture, and to respectfully contribute to a sustainable future. In February, we recognize Black History Month, and we honor the legacy and the contributions of members of our university's Black community. And while we make a point to hold events like this in February, our commitment to learning and engaging in conversations like this one happens all year round. I'm encouraged that so many of you are here with us tonight to join us on this journey. I'm also particularly pleased to be holding tonight's event in the Education Library. For those of you who've not been here before, I heard a little talking. Welcome, we're happy to have you. We chose this venue for a few reasons, one of which is that we've partnered with the College of Education to host this event, and I want to thank Dean Beth Bilson and her team for helping make tonight's event a success. We also chose this location not only because our speaker tonight is a graduate of this college, but because the library is also undertaking critically important work focused on building better representation within our education and our music collections. We're doing this work through a commitment to collecting more works by Black authors and artists, as well as through identifying and purchasing more diverse stories to bring into our libraries. Events like this one are part of this commitment, and they help advance the library's broader goals on inclusion and anti-racism. I'd like to introduce the person who will guide us through this conversation this evening, our moderator, Mel Seising. Mel is here with us today. He's a PhD candidate in the College of Education's Department of Educational Foundations. He's an anti-oppressive, land-based educator who has been teaching for 22 years in the Greater Saskatoon Catholic School District. He's taught all grade levels and is one of the creators of the school division's Eco-Justice program, a grade 8 experiential and inquiry-based outdoor education program established in 2009. Mel is part of the Anti-Oppressive Education Committee for the school district and a learning leader in the area of anti-oppressive, anti-racism, and place land-based education. He was also previously the Treaty Education Resource Consultant for the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation, provincial representative for the Canadian Teachers Federation on the Advisory Committee on Diversity and Human Rights, and provincial representative for the Canadian Human Rights Museum Education Committee. He also happens to be a friend of our speaker tonight, who he will introduce shortly. So please enjoy tonight's discussion. Welcome, and help me welcome Mel Seising.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming out this evening. I'm going to stay on script just because I know how these things work with scheduling. So I'd like to introduce Khodi Dill, a brilliant human being. Khodi Dill is an award-winning Bohemian Canadian spoken word artist, author, and anti-racist educator from Saskatoon. Centering equity at the heart of his practice, Khodi hopes that his work will engage people of all ages in social justice and the arts. He is the author of 2 picture books, including Welcome to the Cipher, which introduces young people to the transformative power of rap music and Little Black Lives Matter, a book of affirmation and Black history for children. Coming fall of 2023, watch for Khodi Dill's highly anticipated nonfiction book, Stay Up, Racism, Resistance, and Reclaiming Black Freedom from Annick Press. And for more information on that, visit thegreggriot.com or follow @Khodi Dill on social media. So more of a personal narrative. I've known Khodi since the summer of 2010, when we were both enrolled in Dr. Marie Batiste graduate study class. I was neck deep in adjusting to having a new baby, while also taking master's courses. I was surprised and taken aback when Dr. Baptiste asked Khodi to recite a spoken word piece titled The Genocide Will Not Be Televised. It was an adaptation of The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, a poem and song by Gil Scott Heron. Technically and emotionally dense and unsettling, in the right way to unsettle, Khodi and I became friends. We shared interests in the arts, education, and family. I would frequently share some of my racial, everyday challenges that my family and I faced. I couldn't have asked for a more helpful support system. So now let us discuss this man's numerous accomplishments. He's a well-known educator who has received recognition for his pedagogical style and brilliance. Furthermore, he has received praise for his poetry and masterful lyrics in many of his songs, and to add and reinforce an incredible list, a renowned author who has challenged moral compasses in addressing the issue of race in the books, as we discussed earlier, as Little Black Lives Matter, Welcome to the Cipher, and his more recent contributions, Stay Up. As a result, it is an honor for me to speak with Khodi Dill, my brother from another mother. So let's get to it, and let's hear this man drop some knowledge.
Much love. Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, so we have a series of questions that we've prepared for this talk. So first and foremost, if you could begin with any response or thought within the topic of anti-racism that you would like others to begin with, what would it be?
Okay. Well, just thinking about today and the whole format of this evening, I think the beautiful thing about it is that it is framed as a conversation, because thinking about, the current state of the world right now, both online and off, there just doesn't seem to be a lot of that type of dialogue happening. I think that what we have in both spheres is a lot of monologues happening all at the same time, if you feel me. So you go on Twitter, you go on Instagram, you go on, I don't know, whatever the kids are doing these days. And it's all monologues, right? We are all sort of just screaming out ideas into sometimes the void, maybe sometimes an echo chamber of ideology. But I think what we're missing really as a society is the ability to have our ideas and our ideologies tested, right? And to have our own, our own resilience tested in terms of our investment in those ideologies. Because the other thing about being an online presence especially is that it becomes very, very easy to just think that you're coming correct. And without being tested through debate, through dialogue, right, and through questioning, I think we risk not even being completely sure of our own stance and our own investment in that. So love to have a conversation, and I'm so glad that all of y'all came tonight, because you'll have a chance to ask questions as well, which I'm really, really looking forward to. Because I'm used to doing monologues too, as a spoken word artist, or, even, as a teacher, or being asked to come and talk about anti-racism. Oftentimes it's just a monologue, and there's not a lot of feedback that comes with that. So this will be fantastic.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of build and add on to that comment of that anti-racist literacy that is sometimes lacking, or the spectrum of, misunderstanding, and when you have social media, the challenges, the possibilities that are there, but also the limitations that come along with that. So that's a great point. So thanks for starting off with that. That's thick. That's a thick response. Describe the catalyst of events or series of events that have influenced your worldviews and your current practice.
Well, how much time you got?
Let's go. We got 40 minutes?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I'm thinking about my childhood. And something that came to mind was, does everyone know who Sofia Coppola is? She's a director, a film director. She's done some incredible work around films like The Virgin Suicides, Somewhere, Lost in Translation. If anyone's seen these films, kudos, you're dope. But also, just really, really talented. She happens to be the daughter of Francis Ford Coppola, and I remember reading a review of one of her movies, and I think maybe Roger Ebert had written it, or somebody like that, who had just made the observation that she grew up on her father's movie sets, and she would just sort of be that quiet kid in the background watching. And I think we have one here tonight, actually. What's up, Taurus? Yes, beautiful, beautiful, right? And that sort of perspective of being the watcher really plays out in her films. If you watch her films, it's almost as if someone just stuck a camera in the corner of a room and observed life. And that's what we see in the films, which I think makes them so human and wonderful. But I feel a kinship with Sophia in many ways in that, I was quite a watcher in my childhood. And, there are probably a number of reasons for that, but the least of which isn't that I, experienced racism. And so people would say, oh, he's shy, right? If he's in the back corner, just watching, observing, what have you, not participating fully in, the experiences of life that my peers and that other people were having, I was watching most of the time. And people would say, he's shy, right? But how much of that was like inherent to me and my personality, and how much of it was a result of being excluded, or at least feeling excluded from the everyday processes of life that were happening around me as a kid on the prairies who was black. So I think about that a lot, because I took that sort of intro version through my life, and I still have it. And in fact, I value it because when you become a watcher, you tend to become a thinker too. Right? You are always analyzing and observing what it is that's going on around you. And for me, what I was analyzing a lot of the time wasn't exactly joyful. There were things that I didn't agree with, and problems that I saw in the way things were happening in front of me, both on a social level within my circles, but also on a macro social level. And so I think the wheels just started turning at a really young age, where it's like, I have to process this. If I'm not going to be in it, right, I can at least process it and have that be my way of relating to the world. And so you go from watching to thinking, and for me then it became writing. And the writing process really was just an extension of the thinking process for me, and it still is. It is a way of understanding what I'm seeing in the world around me, and understanding, too, how that impacts me and influences my identity. Because it is hard to study something or to be a witness to something even without being changed by it. And, of course, that change is increased when you become targeted by things like racism. So I think that's, a bit of a long answer, but it's really short, too, compared to all of the complexities that are wrapped up in what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But do you feel me? You feel what I'm saying? Okay.
I could relate to that. And it's one of the things my son is here in the background, but I often tell him just to read the context of your room.
Yes.
And I was very much brought up in the same way of feeling on the margins and then observing what the framework was. So
Yes.
I know that's something that I've worked through myself and has come out in my work, and something that I pass on to my children as well. So thank you for bringing that up.
Absolutely. Well, and it also extends to the need for racialized people and people of other marginalized identities to protect ourselves, literally to assess the energy of a room every time you walk in, because you don't know who's in that room. And there is always, or at least it feels like there is always, potential for there to be somebody in that room who hates you. Right, and who will be directing their negative energy towards you, who you might have to be prepared to defend yourself against, or whatever that might be. And so absolutely, we are always watching. And that comes with a habit, I think, of, yes, just assessing and processing the world around us at all times.
Oh, thank you for your response, and what a great way we get to discuss this. We're just having a really good visit talking about our experiences.
No doubt.
The next question. In your opinion, what have schools taught you about race issues, and what are schools currently teaching our young people? What have schools done well, and where do they need to improve?
Okay, that's a lot, so we might need to break it up. I guess I just want to say first and foremost that we will be speaking in generalizations here. There are some schools who are starting to do much better when it comes to examining, issues of race and identity and sort of incorporating anti-racism into the way that they operate. Not the least of which is my home school right now, Nutana Collegiate. We have a very supportive leadership team and administration who really want to center this work. And I'm very happy to be able to sit at a table where we, are making decisions that will directly benefit our students in this way. But for the most part, unfortunately, schools are doing the same thing today as they were when I was in school. And I can't believe this because I just turned 40, y'all. I mean, it's, that was a wake-up call. But you know what? When I was in school, the thing that you could say is that schools taught nothing about race or racism, but in the very same way, they taught everything about race and racism. Because I grew up in the, gung-ho, multiculturalism sort of idealistic world of the 90s. And we're still dealing with the reverberations of that to an extent. It's changing somewhat, but not at all schools. You know what I'm saying? There are still some schools who are very much taking an approach of what some call colorblindness, but I call race ignorance in their buildings. What that does is it essentially erases the concept of race in just sort of promoting this idea that we don't see color, right? It's meant to be welcoming and I guess tolerant, if that's a good word. But unfortunately, when you pretend, because it really is pretending, that you don't see race, you absolutely create a scenario in which you also don't see racism. And so for people who are racialized, that creates a problem, right? Because we can't help but see racism. We can't help but feel racism, hear racism, right? Taste racism every single day. And schools are one of the places that I would say are really ground zero for racism and especially white supremacy. Because at the same time as they try and sanitize, which is to say really whitewash the concept of race through multiculturalism and celebrations of multiculturalism, they center only white or Euro-Western ways of knowing, doing, and being within not only the curricula, but also the everyday processes of school. And so that means that in order to succeed in school as a student of any color or racial background, what you need to do is adhere to white norms. And you have to, and you will be assessed on that. And you will be rewarded for how well you are able to do that. And you will be punished through marks and other means for how poorly you're able to do that. So when I think about schools both then and now in many respects, I see them really as arenas of competitive whiteness, where everyone is competing to fit this norm of the Euro-Western man. And I say man very, very intentionally because there is a gendered element here too of what gets privileged and upheld within our school systems. Now, obviously, this puts white students at a bit of an advantage. Okay, let's not sugarcoat it, right? If the contest is to see how well you can fit into white norms and you're already white, you got a head start. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so, but they've been very clever in making this all happen because in their view and in their, even policies and everything like that for many, many years, there's no such thing as race, right? And so we're not doing anything wrong. We're treating everybody the same, in fact, which is completely fair and good, right? That's what they would want us to believe. And so they've gotten away with so much treachery. And I think it's unfortunate because sometimes people will think, well, it wasn't intentional racism. And that just doesn't matter. That just doesn't matter, right? That is a bogus argument. It is not the intention behind people's actions that matters, but the impact of those actions. And so that's what we need to be accountable for. And I think that today, thinking about schools like mine and some others, and I know that you've been an incredible part of really transforming schools that you've worked in as well, or at least those small spaces which we can transform when we're able to have that impact. It really does become about becoming accountable. and becoming responsible and taking that responsibility, understanding that we have the ability to respond to racism and white supremacy which pervade our culture. And so we must do that.
Yeah, reinforce or resist. Right, so I know there's an experience, we do it for our children and our students and our communities, and I think of the comments that are sometimes said in those spaces that are not intentional but have impact, and they don't realize the impact it has on children. And that's first and foremost the most important thing, and we're in a special place, the College of Education. What are we teaching and how are we teaching it? So to talk candidly about this, I think, is very important.
Absolutely. And one big example that comes to mind is when you think about Ribbon Skirt Day and what Ribbon Skirt Day is and where it came from, coming from an incident in Kamsack, Saskatchewan, in a school where a young Indigenous girl was told that her ribbon skirt was not formal wear or was not appropriate for the school's formal day. Right? And thinking about the irony of that, especially knowing that the school is sitting on Indigenous territory, and it just speaks volumes, though, to the ways in which we conceptualize in schools almost every aspect of life through a white lens, right? What does it mean to dress formally? What does it mean to speak well? What does it mean to, do anything? And those are the things that we, again, reinforce and reward in students when they're able to conform. And that conformity, that adherence to white norms, which is so pervasive to this day, that's the same as assimilation. And we can say that we're done with assimilation policies, but the policies are the curricula. The policies are the way that school operates, right? It's all based on the foundational principles of schooling. And so we're really not out of that era of forced assimilation. We've just convinced ourselves of that. And so that's what we need to resist.
Thank you. You and I have talked about this before, and I think we're in a different stage of our lives right now. What is the importance of being an anti-racist educator and a parent at the same time?
Yeah, well, they say that an educator is supposed to act in the place of a parent at school, right? Isn't that in the Education Act?
It is.
In loco parentis or something, some kind of Latin, right? So, and yeah, I think that in both scenarios, we again just have a responsibility because we are ultimately responsible for the young people that we sit with and that we serve. And I think too we really need to think about it as serving sometimes. And we're responsible not just for their behaviors, but also for, first of all, their safety. And so when I think about racialized students in particular and students of other marginalized backgrounds, we are responsible for their safety, right? Whether it's in the classroom or whether we're talking about a parenting scenario. And sometimes what that means is that we have to equip them with the tools to find their own ways of navigating, right? And I shy away from using a word like, resilience, building resilience within them, because I become frustrated sometimes with the ways in which we focus only on building resilience within racialized kids rather than changing the culture that oppresses them. But there is a reality that our culture is still largely white supremacist, racist, violent towards racialized students. And so I think the most important tools we can give them are the critical analysis of how society is shaped to be violent against them. Partly because that will help them navigate, but I think the most important reason is that without equipping young people with those tools of critical awareness and critical thinking, they will experience the pain of the violence of racism. But because of the smoke screens and the veils that institutions place on that racism, for example, by pretending that it doesn't exist, or through whitewashing and so on and so forth, they won't know, possibly, why they're experiencing that pain. And I think that, we see these skyrocketing rates of mental health problems among our youth. And they get worse and worse when you look at it through an intersectional lens as marginalized identities stack up on these kids, so that if you're racialized, you're more likely to experience mental health problems. If you're racialized and gay, you're more likely to experience mental health problems. If you're a racialized gay girl in school, you're more likely, right? And so it goes on and on and on. And so why are we focusing on building resilience in those students rather than looking at, okay, there's a trend here. There is a trend that says if you fall outside the norm of the white, middle class, straight, non-disabled, so on and so forth persona, you will be at an extreme disadvantage in terms of not only just your opportunities to participate in the systems that we've created, which, by the way, who even wants those for the most part, but also your ability to exist peacefully and to be a healthy person here. And so we will wrap around these kids and we'll do everything we can to sort of treat the mental health problems. And I think that's really important. But in many ways, if you look at that from a zoomed out perspective, you look at our society, I think a lot of those mental health problems are symptoms of a larger issue. And that's oppression and its many forms. And that pain with an unknown source, that's what's most likely to lead to those mental health problems, right? Because young people, what they'll do is, because they're internalizing all these messages of, oh, I'm not the ideal person here. I'm not the archetype for this society. I don't fit this mold. But they may not be able to articulate that. They'll just feel really bad about themselves. And that internalized racism, if it's allowed to fester and to grow, especially in unchecked ways, I think it can absolutely turn into hopelessness, which is at the root of despair, which becomes sometimes the root of things like depression. And of course, there are all sorts of mental health problems that can be both, I think, instigated but also exacerbated by racism. And so to me, that's the greatest disservice that we can do, is to not give those young people the language and the tools to be able to understand and articulate what they're up against, because they're up against it no matter what.
For the teacher candidates and for the College of Education, when does this anti-racist literacy begin? What age would you think you begin to have these conversations that could be challenging?
Well, start as young as you can. You know what I mean? Like my children are very young. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. We talk about race, right? We talk about gender. We talk about sexuality, right? We talk about all of these different things, not in a way that is, age inappropriate or that will scare them or make them already dread the world that they're entering and will one be adults in. When they're teenagers, they can deal with that, side of things. But we just want to, I guess, instill in them a race consciousness and a consciousness of identity and also society and of how those things interact. And I think people would be amazed at the age at which young people are ready for that. I mean, they have eyes, right? they have ears. They are witness to and privy to the culture, no matter what we do, even sometimes as parents. And so, again, I remember for me, too, just being a young person and not having that specific guidance. It was a matter of seeing really, really painful things and not knowing why they were happening, or having painful things happen to me and not knowing why they were happening. And to me, that's one of the most difficult and challenging things for a young person to go through. Mm-hmm. And to not have direction for that is just, to me, that's extremely, extremely sad. Right? And so when we move into compassion, I think that's where we start to realize that we need to have these conversations early, because the messages of racism and of inferiority and so on and so forth come early. They come all the time. So we got to be ready.
Yeah, I believe that. Just starting early and having those appropriate moments of entry points, because our students and our young people, they notice the body language when someone feels uncomfortable. So I had to talk about these moments that our young people have. I remember my son, who's in the back there, he said, Dad, there's one day someone said, do you speak English, or do you understand English on the playground as someone was coming in and he saw the hurt in the other boy, but he addressed it. He didn't want to address it with the teacher, but he came home and we talked about it. Then I addressed it.
Yeah.
So, but having him have the tools early enough to recognize it, so then he could console with his friend. So I believe that. Yeah, I think we have to start early. Otherwise, it'll just kind of continue and kind of get masked and glossed over and never really addressed.
Exactly. And, you know, if there are teacher candidates here, I mean, you have to be constantly, I think, on alert for things like this that are happening. Because I guess, you know, you could consider that a microaggression. I don't like that term microaggression, right? It really tends to diminish what's actually going on, considering that even one microaggression can completely derail somebody's life in many ways. But I think that it goes back to your question about how we can act as teachers and parents, and that means also being hypervigilant. Because to racialized people, like, that's why we're always watching. We are hypervigilant. We know that there's at any moment potential for racism to surface, and as teachers, you gotta be there for that too. You gotta have your ears open and your eyes open, because if the young people in the room don't have the capacity, and sometimes they won't have the capacity within a given moment to respond, especially if they're emotionally injured, then we have to be there to respond and to set an example for the other students in the classroom.
Word. Thank you for that response. We'll move on to the next question. There's great responses. Who are some of your inspirations that have influenced you and your current works and previous works?
Yeah, great question. I mean, being here in this building is very, you know, fitting in a way, because some of my greatest influences are people that have been here in these halls and these classrooms teaching. My greatest mentor in this work has been Dr. Verna St. Dennis. Shout out to Verna St. Dennis, everybody. One of the world's best anti-racist and decolonial scholars and humans. And it's been people like Verna who have largely been in teaching roles, but who've been more than a teacher, who've been compassionate human beings. And there's a lot of crossover between anti-racist teachers and compassionate human beings, by the way. Not so much with teachers in other fields. I don't know, you know, what that's all about, but for me, you know, people like Dr. Alex Wilson, Dr. Marie Baptiste, you know, whom I know you and I met up in her classroom as well. I've had the privilege to be educated by some of the world's best anti-racist scholars, and I don't think it's you know, unfit to say that they have been largely indigenous women, just leading this entire fight. And I think we owe them a huge debt of gratitude for truly changing the landscape of what education looks like and what anti-racism looks like, not just within higher learning institutions like this, but within schools too. I know Dr. St. Dennis has done a ton of work with Saskatoon Public Schools, for example, and so many other organizations. And that work takes an emotional toll, by the way. I think, again, you know, I talked about there being compassion in anti-racism work. There's an emotional investment in the work, for sure. We are out here as anti-racist educators, not just trying to teach something, you know, like a formula or a grammar lesson or anything like that, but we're actually trying to save people's lives. And sometimes it feels like, especially if you're, you know, teaching to a largely white audience or, you know, a largely conservative audience or something like that, it feels like you're trying to save your own life in many ways, or, you know, that it might be in danger, for example. And you and I have been in some scenarios where, you know, I've used the phrase eye daggers before. The eye daggers come out. And those eye daggers are just one step from the real daggers. You know what I mean? And so just to be in a position where you are single-handedly trying to advance an idea that is rooted in compassion, but facing resistance for that, takes a brutal emotional toll. And that's where I think the debt of gratitude is really owed to people like Dr. St. Dennis, who have been through so much in trying to accomplish this work, but who have done so, you know, at a great cost to themselves, but at a huge, immeasurable benefit to society, which has a ripple effect like no other type of teaching. And so give it up for Dr. St. Dennis, y'all, I think. Yeah. Huge inspiration. But you know, it's not just educators and professors who have inspired me. There's a lot of people out there who have just been activists and heroes in this world. You know, Malcolm X comes to mind as a huge inspiration for me. And I think that the spirit of Malcolm X is still out there, still yearning for justice, and that's something that I grab onto, you know, as an anti-racist educator myself. Assata Shakur, very much, you know, a militant black liberation activist whose autobiography changed me as a person, enlightened me, and rappers, y'all. Kendrick Lamar, Tupac Shakur, you know, Rhapsody, all these people who have just come forward to share their art in a way that was critically conscious. KRS-One, you know, people that we might get to talk about if we have more time, but because they've given us their stories, they've been the watchers and the tellers of their stories, and I think sometimes those stories, because they come to us in a narrative way, help move us differently than educators sometimes do. And not better or worse, but differently, where you feel it first, right? Think about it later, internalize it, and be changed by it.
Yeah, it's for real. So when I first met Khodi, he did this spoken word piece, and the classroom was silent, and tears were brought to our eyes. To have that impact in a classroom of adults, in a graduate class, I say, just think of the intersection of like this and education, the impact you can emotionally draw people in to the topic. So I want to build off that. And as an artist who covers such a wide gamut of styles, such as poetry, hip-hop, scholarship, etc., how do you know when a feeling or an idea will best fit in? Like a spoken word piece as compared to a hip-hop song, a children's book versus like a more in-depth work like your latest book, Stay Up?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So yeah, I guess I do write in a variety of styles and genres. To me, what's really interesting is that, like with my first picture book, Welcome to the Cipher, I wrote it as a poem. And I did the same thing with Little Black Lives Matter, really. They're both poems. And so the cool thing for me was just that I could basically move very smoothly from spoken word to picture book writing. And the neat thing about it is that, you know, with spoken word poetry, you have the benefit and the sort of dynamic element of bringing a performance to the stage, bringing your body, right, your voice, your energy, your movements to the stage as a way of enhancing the performance and the delivery of the text itself. So moving into something like picture books, you don't have much of that, but you have the imagery. You have the beautiful illustrations, and I've been privileged to work with some incredible black women illustrators on my books, both Arajua Affle and Chelsea Charles, who are Ontario-based black artists, who have taken my words, my text, and breathed that same sort of life into them that I would have tried to breathe through my delivery with the pictures and the illustrations that they created. And you also have this really great dynamic of like creative collaboration where, you know, we're sort of co-inspiring each other along the way. So that's been an easy transition. I think with hip-hop, the neat thing about hip-hop for me is that sometimes you don't even have the idea or have the feeling until you have the beat, right? And so you listen to the beat, and sometimes that gets you moving, gets the ideas flowing, and gets you talking or rapping, and, you know, freestyling or whatever. And then you inevitably, if the beat is hot, you inevitably get to a place of just righteousness, just clear thinking and righteousness, and you will likely get to a place of understanding something that you've been longing to understand, perhaps subconsciously. But it is the art, and again, it's a sense of creative collaboration when you listen to a beat that someone produced, because you're letting that piece of art move you to create more art. So it's really sort of a symbiotic process in that way that is just so rich and beautiful for me. And in the vein of freestyling, I think the most beautiful thing about it is the spontaneity of it. Because, you know, when it comes to writing some of my other books, you know, they might have been based on things I was thinking about or things that happened to me or or things I've been trying to confront anyways. But when you sit down with a good beat and you start freestyling, you don't even know what's going to happen. But sometimes it's beautiful. So love hip hop all the way, always will. And when it comes to doing something like scholarly, like with my forthcoming book, Stay Up, I think the big difference is that, with poems and picture books and things like that, I'm putting out a feeling, right? And I'm hoping that that feeling will make others feel and will change their minds about something. But when it comes to the scholarship stuff, scholarly writing and more academic type writing, I think I'm trying to use my mind to get in people's minds to change how they feel about things. So we're going from feelings to minds to feelings, but hopefully with the same result. And I really do think that we have to do that sometimes, because there are some things, for example, about racism that you can't really teach, but you can make others feel what they feel like. Not to the full extent, but you can make others understand that if there has been an assault on your humanity, that hurts. And by framing it in a story and a personal story, you may be able to inspire empathy in them. And empathy, to me, that's one of the first steps to growing solidarity and changing people's minds about these issues. So, yeah, I think that's how it works. That's the process.
Well, I like the spectrum of entry points that you can have and approach your audience. And I think that's really important, and to really focus on and center around empathy over apathy.
Yeah, and I mean, some things, need to be tailored to an audience, right? Depending on the audience, right? So if I want to have a conversation about, the value of Black life with little kids, I'm going to put it in a picture book or a poem, right? If I want to talk to grown folks about that, we're going to do some learning,
Your picture book, just to reinforce, I use it with my grade 8 class, and I use it with my children. It is, the words and the content is timeless, and it can be used with any audience. It reaches to everyone. So
thank you.
It's awesome. I'm going to drop some lyrics for you. Okay? So I'd like to hear your thoughts on this set of lyrics. Please tell me who the artist is and what you think the lyrics mean and how they might be relevant today. Not knowing your history, you either fight or die or come back home in misery. Yo, get with me, I deal with reality. Loosen your mind to the truth and don't get mad at me. No politician can give you peace. If you trust Jesus, why do you vote for a beast? Emancipation is long overdue, so overcome procrastination, because freedom is within you. For some reason, we think we're free, so we'll never be.
Amen. So this is why I wrote Welcome to the Cypher. I wanted to introduce young people to rap music, not just because I like rap, but because there is so much that we can learn from rap music. And the fact that it has been systematically excluded, not just from radio play where we live, but from classrooms, both at the elementary level, the high school level, and the university level. It has not been given the status of literature. It's so unfortunate. And you think about why that might be. Well, we know why. It's racism, okay? I mean, because you can say rap is too violent, or it's too, there's too much coarse language, or what have you. But we are looking at a set of lyrics that have caused untold people to become socially conscious, if not spiritually awake. So this is KRS-One from a song called Higher Level. And when I think about what we do in anti-racism, I really think it is about moving people's consciousness to a higher level. And I really mean that, yes, in a cerebral sense, but also a spiritual sense. Because we're talking about needing to see and understand that every human being, right, in spite of their difference, racial or otherwise, is a human being. Maybe even that they have a soul, if you believe in that. And that the myriad ways in which society organizes itself against people of color and other marginalized folks is an assault on their humanity, and is something that needs to be fought and changed. So I think these lyrics are absolutely incredible. I mean, for something that was put out there in 1993, very much ahead of its time. And it just goes to show the ways in which rap has been an avenue for social consciousness from the very beginning. It was born out of struggle. And I think, too, that's one of the reasons why it has been so systematically banned, is because rappers often write about what's wrong with the world around them and how it targets, especially black communities. And the powers that be don't want those stories being told because they're critical of the status quo which they seek to maintain. And so I think it's true that if you don't know your history, you may just fight and die. Without an understanding not just of history, but of the ongoing ways in which racism works against us, if we become like those kids who feel the pain but don't see where it's coming from, we don't know where to fight back, right? Mm-hmm. And so sometimes we just start fighting in general, like fighting anybody, even people among our own community who are equally targeted by the systems that are making us feel this way, if there's a lack of understanding of the root cause. Or we may begin fighting against our own selves. I know, like, you know, if we want to take it personal, for me, as a young kid growing up in a Saskatchewan school system, I could have been perceived as just being my own worst enemy in terms of trying to hide, trying to downplay, trying to diminish all of the aspects of my identity that were black, okay? Now, why was I doing that? Nobody told me to do that, right? Nobody sat me down and said, oh, you should talk like this, you should walk like this, you should dress like this, you should try and get the best marks in your English class, right? Perfect that English. I just did it because society told me without telling me that I needed to do that. So in a way, I was fighting blackness within myself. Think about the toll that takes on a child, first of all, but any human being, to be doing that, for one, but to also not be aware that you're doing that. Okay, so this is what I mean when I'm talking about the intersections between racism and mental health problems. Because how can you do that? How can you fight against your own identity without being a depressed individual, right? How can you fight against your own humanity and all of the things that make you a rich and beautiful human being, like your culture, right? Like the way that you talk, like your individual swagger, whatever it might be. How can you seek to hide those things and fit into a mold without not believing in your own beauty and value as a human being on this earth? So this is why we need to instill young people with the ability to recognize their own beauty, their own value, and also the ways in which society has worked to diminish those things so that they won't make that same mistake or fall into that same path that I did of becoming the most dangerous weapon of all, you know, oneself in a white supremacist society. I think it was Steve Biko who said the most dangerous weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the minds of the oppressed. Because once they get us to buy into their ideals, we will start doing the work of oppression for them against others and against ourselves. And I'm speaking from personal experience. So, yeah, I deal with reality now. I deal with reality in ways that expose reality. I have loosened my mind to the truth. I think KRS-One, you know, sort of, you know, very incisively attacks the political systems and the religious organizations that have become tools in the machine of oppression in various ways. You know, we live in a society right now where probably more than half of the population in North America think that Jesus was a Republican, for example. You know what I'm saying? And so, and not to say that there's anything, you know, wrong with Jesus or with Christianity or with religion at all. I mean, my bro and I said a prayer before we got up here today, starting things off in a good way. You know, but to say that the representations of those things have been wholly and grossly problematic and have had untold consequences on human beings, mostly racialized and other marginalized human beings. So when he talks about emancipation being overdue, yeah, it's overdue. I mean, supposedly it happened. You know, they freed the slaves, but that mental slavery is very much still real. You know, you go to Bob Marley as well, other artists who have spoken about this. And we think we're free, and so we'll never be. There's another song called Thieves in the Night by a group called Black Star, a collaboration of Talib Kweli and Mos Def. And they said that we're not free, we're only licensed. And I just, that line really resonates with me too, because we have the illusion of freedom. Some of us, in our ancestry even had free papers that said we were free. But we're really just licensed, again, to participate within a white society. And the license that we're given to do that is through honorary white status. If you act white enough, think white enough, right, you may be granted that access, but even then, not fully. You got the license with like not the A+ membership, but the one just beneath that. So you're gonna you're gonna be disappointed when you're trying to get them rewards, those perks, right? So yeah, if we think we're free now, we'll never be, because we have a long ways to go even still.
Yeah, if I were to synthesize your response, I think of things that come up, works of Fanon. I just showed recently the doll test to my grade 8 students, and they were taken aback by how someone who was 3 years old could tell the binaries of who's bad, who's good, and then they asked the children, who do you recognize with the most? So who taught them that? Mm-hmm. If they're 3, what is around us in an environment? So I think, as Marie St. Clair said, education is what us in this. Education is what is going to get us out. Mm-hmm. Exactly. We're going to continue on this journey of questioning. I want to refer to New Technology. Was the previous album that you released. Racism, I believe, is the most technological thing that humanity has created. Racism appears to rear its ugly head with each generation. In the future, how will technology and race intersect? And what strategies and platforms will be needed to constantly challenge racism? One example that comes to mind is the impact of social media on race issues. You kind of referred to this at the very beginning of the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we can look at the trends, right? And certainly racism is akin to technology in many ways, one of which is that it's constantly reinventing itself, right? Because we've sort of moved from, in some cases, and especially in institutions, we've moved from like that colorblindness approach into like a little bit more of a race-affirming approach. But we've also had the safe space movement come in, where we're trying to create spaces that are safe for everyone. And that, unfortunately, through how it's been co-opted and rolled out again within institutions, has ended up just becoming another manifestation of racism. Because in many classrooms, for example, with safe space posters on their walls, the poster means that we're not going to talk about race in this classroom because people might get uncomfortable. And so we've moved, right? We've moved from, oh, we're all the same and we're all good, to, okay, we recognize we're different, so let's not talk about that so that we don't upset anybody. But the thing is, black people done been upset, okay? We have many, many reasons to be upset, some of which stem from our experiences in classrooms. And now we can't talk about them, you see? And so these things become sort of, I think, liberalized in many ways. They have the illusion of a liberal energy about them, but of course they are just re-manifestations or reiterations of ways of making race and racism taboo topics. So I think we need to resist against that. I think we need to just invite taboo into the classroom and to make people feel uncomfortable. Let's get uncomfy, y'all. Because, like I said, racialized students have been uncomfortable, right? Lots of students from different marginalized identities have been uncomfortable for basically every day of their school experience lives. And so if we can have their counterparts, their peers, their white peers, be uncomfortable for fleeting moments within the school day, I think that should be okay. You know what I mean? Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, technology, again, just continues to contribute to that element of silence. And the way that it sort of silos us off, right, through all of these monologues and echo chambers, means that in some places there are really, really loud voices, right, on these issues. It's just that they're only ever heard by the people who already believe in those ideas. And so, and I'm not just criticizing, the so-called right here, right? People who are on the so-called left also have to recognize that we're not going to get anywhere if we're only confronting each other on these issues. You know what I mean? There is an entire faction of our society, and in fact, it's growing vividly and astronomically. We saw a rise in social justice work after the brutal murder of George Floyd by police. But shortly after, I mean very shortly after, you saw this rise of the sort of interconnected COVID conspiracy theory / alt-right movement that has been really, really scary in many ways. And, folks will get their backs up even just at my mentioning that. I guarantee it, right? Maybe even some in this audience. Uh-oh, he mentioned COVID. What we gonna do? Is my Uncle Larry listening? It is what it is. We have to acknowledge that people with different views from each other exist. And not only that, they're really angry right now and mobilizing against each other. Okay, so how do we diffuse that? How do we diffuse that becomes a very, very important question. Because without any, diffusing of that situation, you're going to have outbursts, you're going to have violence, and we see things like mass shootings and other really problematic individual instances of things happening, but we also see these really broad-scale things happening, like occupations of government buildings and storming of capitals and everything like that, that really do threaten the stability of our society as a whole. And so if we don't get on some diffusing game quick, we're going to have problems. I think we need to talk to each other. And so, honestly, super glad that we have a diverse group of people gathered here today to listen. And I hope that there are some, alt-right listeners out there in Streamland, too. Because this is an invitation. This is a dialogue. I really meant that. This is a dialogue that is open to everyone to engage in. And I want to confront questions not just from people within an echo chamber. I want to confront questions from people who have really deeply seated anger or entrenched beliefs about problems with other racial groups or what have you. I want to confront those too. Why? Because maybe there's a small chance, and even if it is a small chance, who cares, that we can help come to a better agreement of us both being human regardless. And maybe we can help just bridge that gap, that giant chasm that exists right now politically in our society. So I think, we've done a poor job too, even within the so-called left, of completely shunning and demeaning and cutting out those members of our society who have different views from us. And in doing that, I think sometimes we fail to recognize their humanity. And so we just have to do better, all of us, right? And I think that once we recognize that we're in the same boat in that way, that maybe we can work together. Who knows? I mean, not with everybody, but there's going to be some of those Uncle Larrys who are, like, easy to work on. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think we should start. We should give it a try.
Well, with that being said, that hopeful message that we're spreading, and that's what I find from your critical work, has that underlying, message of hope constantly. So for the last part here, thanks for your dedication, creativity, and love. Finally, you get the floor. Like the start of this interview, when you had the first word, you get to leave the audience with the last word before we head to some questions from the audience and also from online.
Yeah, word. Well, again, I just want to thank the university for providing this opportunity. I think it's been real. Yeah. I knew it would be with you, my brother. People think that we're twins, by the way, and often confuse us. Mel also brought a flat cap and a blazer tonight, but we just couldn't do that. We just couldn't do that. So this has been wonderful, and thanks for your excellent questions and just your presence. I used the phrase "come correct" earlier on as well, and I just want to revisit that because I think that if we are going to start speaking to each other instead of either ignoring each other, blocking and deleting both online and in real life, if only, right? If only. But but if we're going to start maybe unblocking people and letting them in and letting those conversations transpire, then we're going to need to come correct, and we're going to need to give them the chance to come correct. Because so far what we've been doing is, if they haven't come correct, we're shutting them out, or we're shutting down, or whatever. There's just no communication happening. I'm talking about restorative justice, right? So that people who have hurt people, or people who have, and even if they have hurt people, they may not have realized that, right? We need to be ready for a call-in rather than a call-out, where we are inviting people in to participate in learning, or unlearning, perhaps, as it's better described. And really thinking deeply about the ways that society may have also duped them as it has us, right? I was duped as a young racialized person into thinking that white was right, and that I needed to do everything I could to try and be that in order to succeed in this life, or to be a happy, well-adjusted individual. But it's not just affected me, it's affected everybody. Those subliminal messages become deeply entrenched values. And so if we can just begin to dissect those, and again, uncover the more compassionate reverberations that exist within us and within our own consciences, I think that we can start to give people the opportunity to reevaluate and then reunite. We are divided. We are severely divided as a society right now. We've got leaders and politicians, both in the political sphere, but also leaders within institutions and things like that, who set the tone for the way things happen and the way that communities operate. And if they have extreme views and extremely divisive views, then we'll experience that division within those communities. And we've seen that in huge ways on a macro level in North America in recent years and currently. But if we can have people especially step up, and I'm not just talking about leaders now, because every time you step up, you are a leader. Right? No matter your status within a community or within an organization, when you step up and confront issues of racism and other forms of oppression, you are a leader. If we can have people start to step up and set a tone in that regard, then we will start to have more unity, and we will be able to reunite, because we will give people the opportunity to learn, unlearn, do whatever they need to do to go away and come back correct the next time. So just come correct. Come correct, and you're still invited to the party.
Thank you so much. If there's any, last things I can comment is that that's awesome. The call in, and the engaging in dialogue is often, I think, is a lost art that we're not seeing. We need to see more of it, and and everyone can be an upstander. Mm-hmm. So what I liked about your message throughout the whole thing is that you brought it full circle. This is where we need to start in good dialogue. With that being said, I think we'll move on to, I can moderate some questions from the audience, and also if there's any online questions that will be addressed your way.
Absolutely. Happy to take any questions, even from Uncle Larry. What you got?
Oh, in the back there.
Yes. So when you were talking about safe spaces and those posters and how it means that, what it means is we don't talk about it. We recognize that difference, and there's that discomfort there. And I feel that discomfort personally whenever we're talking about subjects like this, and I cannot for the life of me place on how or why that discomfort is in me, but it's there. I recognize that. And I was wondering if you had any information on how to work beyond feeling uncomfortable about this, feeling safe, truly to talk about this, to move forwards, to normalize this type of conversation.
Yeah, and honestly, and thanks for sharing that, that vulnerability. I really do think it is just practice. You know what I mean? And to take it back to my earlier comment, racialized people and people of other marginalized identities experience that discomfort all the time. I still remember when my white friend went to Calgary and rode the C train and came back from Calgary and said, "Man, I was the only white person on it." Do you know what that feels like? And I was like, yeah, dude. Welcome to my life. You know what I'm saying? And so there's just a disconnect sometimes in that empathy piece, but you're getting a taste of it. You're getting a taste of it, right? So if anything, I would invite it in. I would invite it in as a opportunity to experience for a fleeting moment what people of marginalized identities experience daily. And once you become accustomed to it, and again, for racialized folks, this is unfortunate to say, but you will develop that resilience toward it. We have to, out of necessity. But the fact that you're feeling that discomfort, I always tell white people, congratulations. I mean, that's a good sign. If you're not experiencing the discomfort, then you're not doing anti-racism work properly. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. We have another question over here.
Well, thank you for this conversation. As an educator, you mentioned before about resistance, and when you are teaching little kids, I guess there is a resistance always. And how do you battle that resistance between education from home and the education that you are providing in the classroom, right? Like, because it's not like you have an empty canvas. Like that canvas is being painted by so many people at the same time. And how do you battle that, or what?
Yeah. So again, my strategy, both with my children but also with my students, has always been, I think, not necessarily to teach them content, but to give them tools. You know what I mean? Because if you teach a young person how to be a critical thinker, for example, how to see and smell racism, and like, you know, we all feel that pain from racism, and in my book that's coming out, Stay Up, I talk about it as BSP, Black Sensory Perception. It's like if you just feel that somebody's being racist, as a kid sometimes you feel those negative vibes, you feel that negative energy, but you might not know what's going on. If we instill that critical consciousness and that lens of anti-racism, they just might be able to know what's going on and use that to, first and foremost, protect themselves from it, but also maybe to challenge it if it's safe to do so, or to seek ways or to find allies that will help them challenge it when it happens. So again, it's like giving someone a fish or teaching them to fish, right? We want to feed these young people for their whole lives, and so we're going to feed them with basically that pill from the Matrix, you know, that helps them see that, you know, there is something going on here. There are powers that be that are dictating, in some cases, their experiences of life in really negative ways. But that they can rise above that mentally and spiritually at the very least, and if they organize and strategize, maybe even socially as well. So I think it's about tools, right? Helping them be critical thinkers.
Yeah, it's a skill set. So I teach my grade 8 students to kind of be in flux. So I'll give them a historical analysis. I'll ask about their positionality. Where are you at? We'll go to other instances and talk. We were just at the Human Rights Museum for 3 days in Winnipeg. We had all these different examples of oppressive systems and what's similar between all of them. Who has been dehumanized and what did they use? What were the strategies? So they can pinpoint what was happening in these frameworks. Is it happening currently? Are we looking at, you know, what's happening between Ukraine and Russia? Are the same conversations still happening? Have we not learned yet? So I ask those questions of grade 8 students because they feel it and they understand. So yeah, tools. Keep your tools sharp.
Absolutely, and when they discover that language, I mean, it's the same thing as teaching grammar, you know. I am an English teacher as well, so teaching grammar to young people is interesting because so many of them are resistant to it, right? They hate grammar. And that's fine because I kind of do too, especially the ways in which it's been taught, right? But the beautiful thing about it is that they all know grammar because they all speak. And you have to know grammar in order to speak. So the only thing that we're doing by providing a framework and a terminology is allowing them to be able to access what they already know. And it's the same thing with these racialized young people. They know that our society devalues their lives. They know that, whether we spell it out for them or not. But if we can teach them, you know, that fact and also why and how it's not right, and how they are worth more than that type of treatment, I think that can be really powerful.
Awesome. Is there any online?
I do have one from me, a couple from me online. May I use the mic so that people online can hear us? Thank you so much, Mel.
and Cody. We have a question here from Dave Dirksen. He says, "Hi, Cody. Larry here." So maybe Larry. Dave Dirksen. Although I do recognize that name. What are a couple of key tenets that educational leaders must embrace to create a new inclusive order in the administration of schools?
Okay, absolutely. Thank you, Dave. I happen to know Dave, so love the comment there. You know what it is that we need this to be mandatory, so that if we are serious about advancing anti-racism within our institutions, we need to make sure that every administrator, first of all, is ready to do that and can show their receipts. We need to make sure that every teacher is ready to do that and can show their receipts. And we need to have those educational leaders checking the receipts on a regular basis. The other thing that I would like to see but haven't yet is a process through which we can have people raise their concerns about racism experienced at school. Mostly in the past, there's been anti-bullying efforts and things like that. Oftentimes those have been whitewashed and sanitized as well. We're starting to see some policies developed around anti-racism, and kudos to Saskatoon Public Schools for being a leader in that regard and having an anti-racism consultant. However, there is still no mechanism through which, if I hear, for example, that there's an administrator or a teacher in a school who was racist or who is blocking the work of anti-racism, I am not privy to a mechanism through which I can raise that concern in a safe way or in a supported way. And so my question really is, for any educational leaders out there, where are your receipts that you're invested in this work? What are the mechanisms that you've put in place in order to ensure that my kids, when they're going to your school, are going to be valued and protected from experiencing racism? And it's not going to be a matter of a checklist, right? Because racism pervades, as we've talked about, every process of school culture. And so there's going to need to be absolute transformational change, which is impossible without buy-in and investment from every level of leadership in that organization, including teachers. And so really, to me, it is about checks and balances. Ibram X. Kendi has talked about this. You sometimes think that you need to just get everybody to buy in emotionally before you can make a policy change, right? We need to just convince people that anti-racism is important and good, and then we'll be able to make change. Well, you're going to be waiting a long time if that's your approach. Make the policy change first, right? History has shown, whether it's through changes to laws around interracial marriage or voting rights or whatever, history has shown that when you make the policy change, people do change their minds. Because again, those policies and the leaders who create them set the tone for their culture and their communities. And so that's what we need to do, is show me the policy. Show me the policy that says if you are an educational leader who's not doing this work, that you will be reprimanded, right? Where is that information? Where can I see that? And how can I see it play out, like, immediately?
Oh, question over here.
Diane Miller here. I really appreciate your work and, have been following it for some time, as you know. But I'd like for you to say a little bit more about what you would like to see happen in teacher education specifically. And I know that there are deans in the room, so it's a bit of a setup question.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for the question, Diane. Want to shout out Diane as one of my brilliant professors as well, and a member of my thesis committee. Great to see you. Thanks for being here. It's much the same as what I was talking about in relation to school leadership. So, and I mean, we're still really talking about school leadership, is we need to be able to see the receipts that this education and this type of education is happening in more than a tokenized way for prospective teachers. When I was becoming a teacher, it wasn't even mandatory to take one anti-racism class, right? And we still see the echoes of that, because folks like me, for whom it wasn't mandatory, are still largely populating our faculties and our staffs in schools. Today, I'm not sure if it's one class or two classes that they need to take out of just one still. Okay, so you see what so you see what I mean. And so what we really need to do is invest and to be able to prove our investment. And to me, one class on anti-racism is not an investment, especially when you can pretty much, and I've heard it from students because I've had the honor to be able to teach anti-racism here at the university as well. I've heard it from students. Oh, I found out a way where I could just write down all the buzzwords and pass this class without changing anything within me. So we're really talking about changing human beings, trying to change human beings and our society, okay? You can't do that in, an 8-week or a 12-week span. It needs to be sustained, right? If we're going to have paradigmatic change, where people are changing their entire philosophies and their approaches to understanding how human beings must relate to each other in a world that is complex and difficult, we need to have that be sustained. Every year, every semester, whatever it is that is necessary. And if students aren't able to show their receipts in terms of proving that change, I think we need to show them the door.
I think about the buzzword of sprints constantly in our school division. Sprints around math, sprints around language arts, but we never have any content around anti-racist literacy. And if they haven't been exposed to or taking it within, university setting or graduate studies, what harm is being done to our children?
Absolutely, and not only that, I think that it mustn't be a sprint, but rather a marathon, right? We need to be getting down, investing, being uncomfortable, doing the grueling work, sweating out until it just dries as salt on our bodies, whatever it is. We need to do that type of work when it comes to anti-racism education if we're going to get anywhere in terms of changing our society.
Yeah.
Can I just say, I'm going to ask the same question that my name is Jennifer Lawrence. In any case, then I want to know what is the way forward instead of racism? Because, this has been going on for years. And at the universities now, okay, it's, we come from different countries. And there has been racism. But we come into this country and we come with the same mentality. We come with the same mentality. And if you get racism, do you know the blacks are the most racist people? Because we here in Canada pass each other as if we don't even know each other. You understand what I mean? And secondly is, parents are working so hard to get their children out of other countries into Canada. Canada. And here our children can marry, the person that he or she marries doesn't know the culture of the country where the child comes from. And then you find them being married for 2 years only because they don't even know each other's culture. The in-laws don't even know each other. There's no counseling going on in this marriage. There is no Jesus in this marriage. And there's no respect. You understand? Now, I think the way forward, I'm going to talk, Khodi, I'm sorry. But I'm telling you, the first thing with culture, with racism, is respect. Respect. And we always talk about humanity, human rights, but we don't talk about human. We are all human. Always human rights, human rights. And secondly is the racism that's going on. Our foreparents did fight for this, the racist and apartheid and things like that. We are the children, we are the parents, we are showing our children racism. We're teaching our children racism because racism starts in our houses. Our houses, and then we go and we tell my child, remember, walk into this auditorium, I can be the only black lady, but I walk in with, I've got it.
Yes, yes. Give it up, y'all. Absolutely. That's strength. Absolutely. And I think it's so beautiful that you're modeling that strength and that bravery for your grandchildren. And I just want to say, you know, in thinking about the racism that exists within the black community, it's very, very real. It's also very peculiar that it's anti-black racism, right? And we have various, you know, forms of colorism and shadeism that go along with that. But of course, you know, at the root of that anti-black racism that exists within the black community is white supremacy. And so, again, I see it as a symptom, right? It is a symptom of a root problem in white supremacy. White supremacy, thinking about a way forward, is what we really need to dismantle in our society, I feel. And this is, I think, why we are often short-sighted in our conversations about race, because we will talk about, okay, how do we get everyone to think that, you know, all people are equal or whatever it might be? Well, we won't be able to get very far unless we dismantle some of the social structures that have been built to create that type of thinking in the first place. And I'm thinking about white supremacy, but also capitalism and its ties to things like education, and the ways in which when people do come to this country from other countries and maybe who are racialized, oftentimes the dream that they're sold is that if they can leave their cultural identities behind, they can be successful here. We must change that. We have to change that so that no matter who you are or where you come from, your identity will be affirmed and included, not just at a table that is pre-existing, but at one that we are constantly reinventing to accommodate you and to advocate for you so that we can transform our society until it benefits everyone equally. How are we doing for time?
We just have one little shout out from online. Willa and Tyson want to know when you're coming through.
Hey, niece and nephew, love you guys. Hopefully before too long, I'll be out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Carolyn Doy. I'm the music librarian here in this branch. And first of all, I want to say a huge thank you to Mel and Khodi for being here tonight. Give it up for them. Honestly, it's been such a pleasure for me to hear you speaking in person, because I first saw your book, you know, and wanted to put it on the shelf a while ago, and it's like coming to life here in the library. As a token of our appreciation for being here tonight, we wanted to make a donation to a local organization that is doing anti-racism work in the community. And so we're working with the Anti-Racism Network to donate some resources for their local programming. They're a growing alliance of community members from across 30 organizations in Saskatchewan. And if anyone wants to get involved, you can Google them or go on Facebook. They have monthly meetings and they're doing great work. I just wanted to just comment on, you know, the privilege it is to be here and to listen to your words tonight and to be here in conversation and dialogue together. You know, we've been doing ongoing projects in this library to really figure out where the holes are in our collections and bring diverse voices onto the library shelves, specifically Black and Indigenous authors from the province, but, you know, internationally as well as musicians and storytellers. And really the goal behind that is to support our teacher candidates and students on campus in the work that they are doing. So, you know, this is just one event, but we're continuing that work obviously into the future as well. This evening tonight couldn't have been possible without a lot of work from the Anti-Racist Education Mentorship Project, and particularly Alyssa Clements, who's here in the audience. Thank you so much, Alyssa. We really appreciate all of the work that you've put into this event tonight. And AEM, the Anti-Racist Education Mentorship Program, is supporting K-12 students through anti-racist education, and I know they're putting together some anti-racist education lesson plans that they're delivering in schools in the province, which I just think is so cool. And so, yeah, they're doing great work, and I just want to thank them for helping us out tonight. A couple other notes before I send you on your way. The Reme Modern Art Gallery has generously donated some tickets for admission to their galleries. If you didn't get one on the way in, please go to the desk and you're welcome to take one or two for a friend. They have some great artists in the galleries right now as part of Black History Month and throughout the year, including Deanna Bowen, Nick Cave, Stan Douglas, and others. And I'm really excited for a live mixtape exhibition that's coming up there in April, which features Canadian hip-hop musicians and artists. Finally, I know the thing you've all been waiting for. If you didn't know, we're doing a draw for a couple of Khodi's books. And I watched Megan do this according to all the rules. She didn't look at the names beforehand. So I hope these folks are in the audience. But Liara Tatusa Standing is one of the winners. Are you here? And the other one is Anib Gondal. Hi. So please come and see us afterwards and claim your prize. Yeah, I think that's it. I want to welcome you to stay afterwards and get some refreshments. I still see some there, and maybe chat further with Khodi if he has some time, or Mel. And yeah, thank you so much for being here, everyone. Have a good night.